Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome Jumbos to our program tonight. My name is Nicole Anderson, and I'm Associate Director of Alumni Career Services in the Office of Alumni Engagement at Tufts. My colleague, Amanda Tremont, Assistant Director in Alumni Engagement, has put together an exciting panel of Tufts alums. She'll be working behind the scenes to ensure a smooth program, and you'll see her name in the chat box. Our program will start with an introduction of our moderator, and he'll dive into the questions that he has prepared ahead of time for our panelists. And questions and answers with the audience will follow that. I'll ask the audience to type questions into the chat box, and I'll read them to our moderator. And following the Q&A, we will then move into breakout rooms for informal networking and more questions. Now, I'd like to review the Tufts community values statement that guides our work both on and offline. Our mission invokes an environment of mutual respect, free expression, and inquiry. Program participants accept these principles when they join this community. In doing so, they agree to abide by the following community values: respect for the rights, differences, experiences, and dignity of others, expression of our viewpoints in a thoughtful and respectful manner, honesty and integrity in interacting with all members of the community, and accountability for personal behavior. Now to our moderator, Mahmood Malihi. As co-president, Mahmood is responsible for co-managing Leggett McCall properties and identifying new business opportunities. As a senior principal in the firm, he is a member of LMP's investment committee and executive committee. During the past 30 years with LMP, Mahmood has had an active role in more than $2 billion worth of investment and development activities. Prior to his current role, he held the position of Chief Operating Officer for the company and was responsible for LMP's third-party fee-for-services activities, which were in excess of 14 million square feet of real estate. Prior to that, Mahmood was a Senior Vice President of LMP, directing the company's Mid-Atlantic development activities from Washington, D.C. Mahmood is currently acting as a real estate advisor to several institutional owners, including Harvard University, Northeastern University, Tufts University, and the First Church of Christ Scientist, on a wide range of strategic and transactional real estate matters. Prior to joining LMP in 1983, Mahmood worked in general contracting and civil and structural consulting in the Boston area. Mahmood graduated summa cum laude with his Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Tufts University, and he followed that with a Master of Science in Construction Management at Stanford University. So now I'd like to hand the program over to him. You're on mute still, I think.
Thank you, Nicole. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, and welcome to everyone, all the Jumbos. We have an exciting program for you today with 4 of the experts, subject matter experts in real estate in the Boston market. And we're gonna first go through and have the panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll start the discussion. So with that, I'm gonna ask Jordan to start.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jordan Yarboro. I'm a vice president at Jones Lang LaSalle in our Boston office. I graduated from Tufts in 2009, and since 2012, I've been at JLL. I'm a broker specializing in the North suburban market, focusing mostly on the representation of landlords and tenants in the R&D lab office spec sector in the market. So excited to be on this call and to speak with all of you.
Thank you, Jordan. JR?
Thanks, Mahmood. It's JR McDonald, and I am with Newmark and specialize on industrial and tenant representation. I've been at it in the commercial real estate world since 1992. I was a double major in economics and political science when I was at Tufts. I spent 15 years at Cushman & Wakefield, and have been at Newmark for the last 7 years or so. Can everyone still hear me? I'm getting a funny message on my network here.
We can hear you fine, JR. Keep going.
Good. Yeah, and so my team does several different product types. What's kept us pretty busy and throughout the COVID period is we do the local work, most of the local work for Amazon on the last mile side of things, which has really given us an interesting view into really what's happening on the cutting edge side of things in industrial real estate. So look forward to the panel and speaking with you all tonight.
Thank you, JR. Bryan?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bryan Anderson, class of 1992, as well as JR. I'm the managing partner of Atlantic Retail, overseeing all 9 offices. We specialize in retail. All we do is retail, so I like to say we pet our own dog and we don't get bit that way. If it goes to office or industrial, I usually typically hand it over to JR and say, I don't know what I'm talking about. I started in 1992 as an intern for another Tufts alum. And so I've never had another job. So I hope there'll be no questions about how you broke into the industry and how you moved around, because I won't be able to answer them. Look forward to talking to all you tonight.
Thank you, Bryan. And Meredith?
Thank you. So I did not go to Tufts undergrad. I actually went to Tufts for graduate school. So I spent my first 10 years in working in development in Boston, so ground up development for companies Spalding and Sly. And after Spalding and Sly, I went to Tufts to the Urban and Environmental Planning program for graduate students. And since then, I worked for MIT for a number of years on the Chemical Square Initiative. And then about 7 years ago, I joined CBRE and do primarily office leasing for both landlords and represent tenants in downtown, a little bit in Cambridge, a little bit of life sciences, but my specialty really is sort of core downtown office space.
Thank you, Meredith. Thank you all. So we have 4 great subject matter experts, and as we all discussed sort of how to focus this discussion, we all felt that the pandemic we've all navigated through for the last 18 months has had deep impacts on every aspect of life and every aspect of real estate, frankly, from telemedicine to distance learning to working at home to retail. And we decided to focus a lot of our questions on the impact of that. So I'm going to start the first question to our panelists on sort of how have your sector, how has your product type dealt with the impact of the pandemic over the past 18 months? So I'm going to ask the question in the same order that you introduced yourself. So Jordan, you're on first.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that over the last 18 months in the pandemic, really the lab R&D sector really hasn't slowed down at all. In fact, I think that, across the board, rents have increased, demand has certainly increased. There's, more life science conversion and development activity taking place in every area of Boston, whether it's the Seaport, downtown, Cambridge, certainly Somerville, all the way out to the suburban market on 128. So I think that what we've noticed from COVID is that, this is an innovative economy up here in Massachusetts, and, the space that you would need for, whether you're developing the newest drug or newest therapy or product, in the robotics or defense, you need the physical space in order to create that. So, we've had great activity in that market. The office side of things certainly have slowed down, which I'm sure Meredith will speak to. But for my particular sector, I'd say that things have been pretty steady, if not improving over the last 18 months.
Thank you. JR, how about industrial? And if you could give as many anecdotal examples as you can in terms of sort of where rents have gone or where transaction volume has gone, that would be great.
Yeah. So COVID was an accelerator to the industrial sector. We saw records in rents, in sale prices, in land prices, in brokerage revenue. So it was across the board. Everything was positive. And we learned a little bit how to work in a more sort of dispersed way than what we were typically used to. But we've seen rents. We just signed a deal, an urban deal that was over $40 a foot, triple net, which will sell out, and it could, on a per square foot basis, sell out at more than what towers are going to trade for in the city of Boston. So it's a real just land values. We're seeing 20-30 million an acre for urban sites, for last mile delivery stations. So it's been a crazy time. And I would say it's not just Amazon. If you think about it, people stop going to restaurants, and I do a lot of work for Ahold, who's the parent company for Stop and Shop. And through COVID, month over month, the selling and BA can talk more about the retail side of it, but the grocery store chains, it's a very, very low margin business, and they survive off of holiday weeks where they get a 5 to 10% bump. And they were up in sales 15 to 20% over months. And it put just a ridiculous strain on the supply chain, which is a great thing if you're in commercial real estate trying to sell people more industrial space. And we'll talk more about it later. I think our limiting factor is going to be land, construction prices, and the availability of bringing more inventory online. So it's a crazy confluence of a bunch of different circumstances that have just lit that market on fire.
We'll be back to you on that. Bryan, how about the retail sector? What have you seen there?
Sure. I think the biggest thing what we talk about all the time in retail, we saw it in the crash of 2008, and then we're seeing it through the pandemic. It's for retailers, it's adapt or die. You either figure out how to change the way you do things, or you don't survive. Somebody else will do it bigger, better, faster. To JR's point about the grocery, it was a life preserver for some of the grocers that were struggling to survive in competition. And for others, it was definitely an accelerator for them. And at the same time, it was for other retailers, say Target and Walmart and some of the other big boxes, it made them rethink who they wanted to be, what size. I could even give you an example of a mid-box like Best Buy that wanted to rethink who they wanted to be and what size they wanted to be. Pre-pandemic, they were all thinking they were going smaller and so forth. And we saw in 2008, we saw Target start to adapt and say, we need to get away from the rural and let's get into the urban. Now we're actually seeing Target focus back, not just on top of doing all sizes, but we're seeing somebody like Target looking at getting potentially bigger in their sizes to have last mile delivery right out of their existing retail stores. That's one example of it, but bottom line, it's in the retail world. Obviously, those that have survived have stepped on the gas because sales have been up. And certainly we can point to the commodity retailers that people are buying every day that have been shopping. We're seeing more and more of the internet companies that are looking for bricks and mortar locations. Biggest challenges are supplies. So the sales that are going through these stores and getting them replenished. Whether it's a furniture company, when you walk into a lot of furniture stores right now, everybody's has been taking their stimulus checks and going out and buying a new sofa or a new couch, and then only to find out that it won't be delivered till December because they can't get it in from China until December. So there are certainly, while sales are up, there are certainly challenges with it. There are obviously construction costs have gone through the roof in the last, which is really more important to retailers than to, I think, a lot of other folks, because they are so dependent upon their return and what their sales forecast and what it's going to cost them to build out, because they do, as JR mentioned, they do a lot of them work on thin margins. So I think at the end of the day, what we're going to learn over the past 18 months are which retailers can adapt the fastest, and you'll see those that will come out the other side the strongest.
Thank you. And Meredith, last but not least, office sector. What have you seen?
Wow, what a wild ride, really, truly. I think for a while we felt like every day was a Sunday downtown, where you just didn't see anybody on the street. And it was hard. I mean, it was, was this going to be 2 weeks or 2 months? And it was certainly, I don't think anybody thought it was going to be longer than a year. So what happened initially, it was a lot of just informational. We spent a lot of time with our clients trying to just advise them and really spent the first, I would say 90 days, just really having a lot of conversations about what if this is longer, and what does this mean if longer can be more permanent, and how will that impact company culture? How will that impact value of buildings? How will that impact the way we've really thought about working for the last 25 to 30 years? And so there was a lot of analysis on that. And I would say some people, and you saw it play out in the media, were big believers that this was just something that was going to happen and we'd all bounce back. And others felt that this was going to change the way we work in our companies forever. And I think the reality is it's probably still unresolved, is maybe a little bit of the truth there. But what we've seen are two main points I would leave this group with is, one, we saw this incredible influx of sublease space, which was something that we had never really had to deal with, or hadn't had to deal with in at least a decade or more, and certainly not at the level. So it's almost like if you went somewhere on vacation in the summer, everybody puts their house on the market for sale to see if they can get a buyer. It was almost like every company put their space on the sublease market to see if they could get a taker. And it just shot up to over 100% from what it had been, because we were also at a point in our market where, in Boston at least, where we had historically low vacancy rates. And so to see the availability almost double within 6 months was very hard for us to reconcile. However, it was still a fairly healthy availability rate for almost it almost brought us back to a normal bounce for what it should be from a landlord and tenant side. But as things went on and companies started to think about it, we really started to advise, and it was really smart for companies who were thinking about coming back to maybe come back and take either less space, but to try to actually gobble up some of the sublease space, because we thought it was of tremendous value. There. The second point is rates never really dropped on a direct basis, which really surprised us. You would think that the market would have severely tanked during that period. And it really never did. A lot of institutional owners held their rates. Where we saw a little bit of softening in the market, and it's still there today, in the Class B product in Boston. So, which makes sense. A lot of tech and startups who were more comfortable with working at home more often took the B and some of the lower priced product in the market. So that is starting to come back, but that was probably the hardest hit. But overall, I would say volume is up, it's going back up, and we have a record high number of tenants back in the market right now, which is unbelievable. If you were sitting here a year ago, you would have felt like that was impossible. But I think it speaks to, and Jordan had mentioned it earlier, the resiliency of Boston. I'm not quite sure where everybody's calling in from, but Boston is a tremendously resilient market in terms of its diversified economy. So we've got a lot of product we've already talked about here, but it's really the R&D, and we're incredibly lucky to have the universities that we have here and the talent we have here, because it's shown that we can play in a bunch of different sectors here. So unlike some other urban markets across our country, we have life science, we have robotics, we have our traditional finance, we have our creatives here. And so it's really been an interesting place to work in, from real estate to the pandemic, but for investors to also stay focused on the market here.
Thank you, Meredith. So if the first question was focused on sort of the rear view mirror, the next question is going to be harder, because it's focusing forward and asking you all to give us your best guess of what you think the impact of COVID will be, both in the short term, let's call that the next 12 months, and in the longer term, meaning to the extent that you think there are structural changes that have come about as a result of COVID in your sector. It would be great to hear your thoughts on those. So we'll go in the same order. So Jordan, if you could comment on sort of what you think is going to be the story in your sector in the next 12 months, and also perhaps more structural changes that are coming, whether it's in the CGMP market or in the lab space.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think structurally wise, I think the story for the next 12 months is probably going to be a supply-driven one. I think that we, in the lab space, we're starting to see, pockets, certainly expand and develop across the suburbs, trying to find where that new location is. I think people are always asking, where is that next Kendall Square going to be? And I don't think that answer is specific to one of those locations. I think you'll start to see groups migrate to areas for specific reasons. I think that, from a building standpoint, I think you're going to start to see more manufacturing driven requirements. We're already starting to see those. Maybe not the larger GMP manufacturing facilities. Will continue to be further west and and to some extent outside of Massachusetts. But for personalized medicine, we're starting to see a lot more lab requirements that have an R&D angle, but also have a portion of manufacturing as well. So buildings that will have expanded clear heights, I think better for distribution, power, those types of infrastructure needs. You're going to see that. And I think that's going to be, taken from, purpose-built facilities for that purpose, as opposed to the conversions that are popping up. So I think it's going to be a supply-driven one. Again, I think, we mentioned, how COVID has changed, our own daily lives. I think from the lab and R&D market, you're always going to need to have the physical space to do the work, as I mentioned. But, I think there is going to be expanded use for flexibility. We're learning how to adapt that environment, and I think to be, attractive. And from a recruiting standpoint, you're going to have to offer something, special, I think, to your employees, whether it's the flexibility of how they're working or the space that their need is designed, thinking, more towards the sort of future of work or how people are more comfortable. I think those are what we'll see across, that sector particularly.
Thank you. JR, what are you seeing in industrial?
Yeah, I mean, it's what's going to happen is the challenges are going to be around supply and the constraint on the supply. We've already seen you have to be, all the easy deals are done. So anything that was out there that was available has already been scooped up. And now what we're doing, we're working with people like Bryan on taking broken shopping centers and turning them into distribution centers. We're taking broken suburban office buildings and turning them into distribution centers. I mean, there's a reason why Amazon wants to be in Boston. It's a top 5 MSA, and it's what makes all the rest of these food groups prosper here. It's around the hospitals, the learning institutions, the availability of talent. It's not easy to permit these things in Massachusetts. So there's right now, if we track it, it's probably 24, 25 million square feet of active requirements out there, which is, everyone like Target, Walmart, they're all coming here because, as Bryan was talking about, having to adapt. So they're all out there trying to vie for this same space that's driving the price of that space up. It's you still have, as Mahmood, a very, very challenging permitting environment. So we're not going to be able to get the supply to meet the demand. So the question is who snaps first in all of that? And it's what it's led to thus far is people really going in and paying crazy numbers on an FAR basis for industrial buildings. We saw one that traded down in Taunton for $75 an FAR foot. So for everybody to really dumb that down, which is something I'm pretty good at, is $75. The typical rule of thumb for a suburban 495 industrial warehouse is you want to pay for that land what you're going to get in net rent. And I can assure you they're not going to get $75 a foot. And for the last 30 years of my career, the prices have moved by nickels. And now all of a sudden, everything's a double-digit rent. Everything's approaching 20 triple net inside of 495. So there's craziness, but it's a shift in what's happening, and it's away from the sort of the traditional retail to this whole e-commerce phenomena, which is it's been really, really interesting to watch it unfold.
And at $30-40 net, but you're seeing multi-story industrial?
I think the problem, and everybody thinks that they should go on spec and build multi-story. The problem with multi-story is the amount of capacity that you get out of those multi-story buildings. The roads can't handle the traffic that comes from them. So we have a couple deals where they've done parking on the roof, which makes a much more expensive building, or structured multi-level. But I think the idea of multi-tenant, multi-level industrial, I just don't think it works in the places where the rents would warrant it. The roads can't handle it, and those people are not. You're not going to put Amazon and Walmart in the same building. It just doesn't happen. They don't play in the sandbox well together. But it's coming. I mean, they're definitely structured parking. The land is what's driving it, and so you have to start going vertical with the parking for sure.
Thank you. Bryan, how about the retail market?
I think looking forward, I think the biggest challenge in the near future for all retailers or restaurants is labor. We talk about, okay, Governor Baker lifts the restaurant, finally lifts it in May, and everybody can go sit down full time. It's great. But if you don't have any staff, you have people standing outside with empty tables. And when you look at the margins of retailers and or restaurants, they're so razor thin to begin with. And then you add that you can't get the customer through because you can't actually service the customer because you don't have any labor. It's going to be a massive problem. There isn't any retailer that is not hiring lots of folks right now. You see a grocery store like Stop and Shop that's offering to pay $25 an hour to bag groceries or stock shelves on Cape Cod. There's something wrong with what we have in our labor pool right now. And I think that's the thing we're going to figure out. Again, who are the smartest retailers? Who are the best able to adapt to it and in working on these tighter returns? And for looking at growth and looking at the costs as they get smarter about it. JR talks about Amazon paying $20 a foot. Well, they don't actually have to really run a pro forma tied to a finite sales volume for that individual location to do that. There's a little bit of an eyeball test, and I won't pretend to be an expert in his world, but I do know that there is a finite return for a retailer to say yes or no on every single individual deal that they do. So we can't just fudge that there's going to be, maybe we'll have a problem with labor costs later on. We can't just we underestimated the cost of construction and we're responsible for it. Those things become the real challenges in the near future for every single retailer going forward. As far as all of the restaurants around Boston, how many of those survive? I would still argue that 25% don't make it because they just can't survive on the margins because they can't. It's not that people aren't willing to spend the money; they can't serve them. So that to me is the real near term, and we'll talk later about the other challenge of Jared keeps stealing all the land that I want to develop shopping centers on around the suburbs. So every time I get priced out by him.
Thank you. Meredith, how about the office sector? What's ahead for us?
Yeah. I think it's going to come back, and it's going to come back strong. Companies will be very thoughtful about it, and to the extent they can, I think they'll ease a lot of their employees back. I think probably ultimately what will happen though is there'll be a sort of the office people and then the remote folks, and I think nobody really knows how that will work in the long run. Will you be passed over for promotions if you're not in the office? Will you not get the best projects if you're not in the office? It's been very clear through the extensive surveys we've done of companies that younger folks really view the office as part of their social life and really value coming in and being mentored and socially engaging on that front, because a lot of folks in the pandemic, we may have lived with 3 or 4 roommates in the city, and that was very, very hard to work from home. So not everybody has a work from home office that is suitable for the type of work that people need to be doing. Again, I'm going to come back to this diversified economy here in Boston. It's hard for me to speak to other markets for those who are on the call, but definitely we're seeing a lot of out of market tenants come in and start to sniff around Boston for a lot of different reasons. So I'm surprised by how many companies that aren't in Boston today but that want to be up and running in Boston by the fall or in January at the latest. And these are big, good, growing companies that have decided that Boston will either be their headquarter or will be their East Coast headquarters. So often they'll be beachheads and they'll start small, but have projected growth, pretty substantial projected growth. So we're going to have to battle out the same way you two are battling it out for land outside the city. I'm going to be battling out with Jordan and his colleagues for lab space versus office space here in urban locations. So I think, cautiously optimistic. It feels like it's slow, but I think by the end of the year, it's going to be roaring back. And I think rents are going to be very high. I think you're on mute.
If it's any help, I think that the traffic heading into the city every morning has been steadily increasing over the last few weeks. So no, that's a good indicator for me that things are coming back.
Well, that too. And then also one thing I probably should have mentioned earlier on the first go around was, for a long period of time, for the better part of 6 to 9 months, occupancy levels in buildings were 3 to 5%. So it's understandable why people felt like the office was dead. They're now north of 25 to 30%, and they're increasing week by week on that front. I think a lot of companies made the decision that their employees will come back after September 1st. So we expect that to shoot up pretty dramatically. So that traffic, is that going to go really, really, really high, or people are going to have to get more comfortable using public transportation again?
And Meredith, are you seeing any changes in the metrics for square feet per employee, or are employers trying to densify or de-densify, or are you seeing any changes there?
Yeah, it's a great question. Everybody's trying to understand how to save money when they come back, right? So do they need less square footage? Can they do hoteling? Can they have some employees work from home or on a limited schedule? So the problem is everybody wants to work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the office and stay home Monday, Friday. So as they work through that, what we're seeing is more and more groups saying, I'm more comfortable sharing a desk if that allows me more flexibility to work from home. And therefore, I ultimately can probably take less space, or at least not take the shadow space that they once were thinking they would take. I think that will change once people get back into the office. The first time there's nowhere for people to sit and they get frustrated. And we're not trying to upsell on brokerage, but I do think that people are going to undershoot the requirements coming out of COVID on a few requirements here.
Great. Thank you. So Nicole, I know we are bumping into the breakout room, but is it okay if we open it up to a couple of questions before we go to the breakout room?
Sure, we have time. We're actually just bumped into the Q&A part, not the breakout room part yet. So
Great.
I'd like to, let our audience know if they have any questions, they can type them into the chat, and I'm happy to read those questions. And Mahmood can facilitate or moderate the panelist responses. Let's see. We can start with some of the questions that came in before the program. Let's see here. And you can tell me if this was already covered. Does industrial and multifamily reflect peak values, or is there more value to be created? If so, how? I'll throw that one out there.
Okay, so there's a multi-family residential aspect to it, and then there's the industrial one. So JR, if you hit the industrial, I'll try to cover the multifamily side.
Sure.
JR?
Yeah, I don't think we've, can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yes.
I don't think we've peaked. I think there's probably a good 18 to 24 months of run, barring something crazy on the interest rate side of things. But I just think the market dynamics here, and just knowing some of the investment sales that our team has been a part of, all continue to just sort of keep going. So I think there's to the point of the question is there an opportunity? Yeah, it's a high risk opportunity. And if you're doing it on spec, it's even higher risk. I just think there's risk in the build to suit environment right now, just because of the amount of information that Amazon has, they can force people to build on very, very low going in yields because they know what these things sell out for. If that changes, that's where there could be some people getting, whipsawed and maybe hurt a little bit. But the fundamentals are still there for another, I would say, 18-month run anyway on the industrial side.
And on the multifamily, I would say when the pandemic first hit, sort of second, third quarter of last year, there was obviously a mass rush to the suburbs and away from urban density. In the last 3 to 6 months, that has changed. People are coming back to urban multifamily. The biggest challenge right now for multifamily is cost of construction. I mean, from lumber to steel to labor, it is very difficult to pencil a union built, which for urban construction, you're talking union built. So building a union built high rise is only possible in the best location. If you're slightly off the best location, it will cost you the same to build it, and yet you won't get enough rents to justify building it. But I think once the construction turbulence, once the supply chain clears itself out, the demand is very much there. And I think projects will become feasible again. But right this minute, there's a lot of permitted multifamily projects in the urban centers that are sort of stuck because of lack of feasibility.
I think we have time for one more question and then we can move into our breakout rooms. Let's see. We have a question from the audience, which is, I have been working on building an automated valuation model for industrial properties for a course I've been taking. And one of the things I've been looking at is the impact of proximity to a major highway interchange as compared to the impact of traditional drivers like ceiling height. Do you think the value drivers within the industrial sector are changing as e-commerce and logistics become more salient in the market?
JR, that has your name all over it.
I'd like to see the model, I guess. I mean, the answer is it depends, I guess. I mean, there's, Bryan hit on the point. The further out you go, where you can put these larger sort of mid-mile type facilities or short facilities, like they call them. The issue is the places where you can find land, you can't find labor. So you can't build a 1 million square foot building that has a great, out in, Western or Central Mass. You can't do that if you can't hire the people to work in the building. So the drivers have become really, really skewed, and it all depends on what you're talking about. The e-commerce side of it, all those rules have changed. I think they mentioned the clear height. Clear height is not what it once was, because there's a lot of product that comes in overnight and goes out the same day. So it's the idea of going to the 30-foot ceiling with it is sort of out the window. But it sounds like someone much smarter than me, which is working on that. I'd love to see the model when you're through with it.
Well, that question came from participant Malika Martin. I don't think she'll mind if I mention her name since she posed it to everyone in the chat. And so I think what we'd like to do now is to transition over to the breakout rooms. Amanda's going to work on that. And before we do that, I want to mention a few things. If you would like to connect professionally with like-minded jumbos in real estate, you can join The Herd, which is our new mentoring platform. It's a flash mentoring platform, which means it's short-term mentoring. It doesn't have to be weeks and months and years. And it is for alumni to alumni mentoring as well as alumni to student mentoring. And you can find the link in the chat now. Amanda will post that there. We also encourage you to join the Tufts Real Estate Network, which is one of the many shared interest groups who work in the field around the country. And for more info, you can email our colleague, Amy McDonald, who works at Alumni Engagement. Amanda, would you mind putting her email in the chat too?
Absolutely.
I think what we're going to do is we're going to move into 3 different rooms. There are going to be two panelists in each room, with the exception of the room that has Mahmood and myself, since I'm not a panelist. And then at 6:58, we're going to close the breakout rooms, bring attendees back to the main room, and we will have Mahmood close the program. So Amanda is going to work her magic now and put us into our rooms, and we can go from there.